The launch countdown was at 9 seconds when her father's wife took the dispatch tablet from her hands and told the waiting riders that she was only a guest. Vivian Arden Pembroke raised the microphone toward the folding chairs beneath the covered plaza at Eastgate Transit Commons. Asha is joining us today as a guest and technical contributor, she said. Mallory will guide us through the launch. Asha did not reach for the tablet. She looked past Vivian at the live route screen. Route 3 showed 26 confirmed riders, but the depot configuration allowed only 24 seats after the accessible boarding positions were secured. Mallory accepted the tablet, tapped the departure panel, and received an amber warning. Asha Holloway stopped his driver check-in. The Municipal Mobility Safety Observer leaned toward the screen. Hold Route 3, Asha said. Vivian's smile tightened. You are no longer directing this floor. Route 3 has 2 passengers without confirmed seats. The other 3 routes can remain ready. Riders turned toward her as 4 Commonway Nightlink shuttles waited beneath Foundation-funded banners. Bennett Isaiah Pembroke stood beside the sponsor platform, tall enough for Asha to see his face above the crowd. He had heard Vivian call her guest. He did not correct her. Instead, he signaled the event manager to continue. Follow the sponsor chain, he said. Mallory tried the handoff again. The tablet rejected her credential. The dispatch panel remained amber. Darius looked at Asha instead of Mallory. Who authorized the change in launch control? Asha asked. Vivian stepped away from the microphone. You are turning a celebration into a personal dispute. The route count is not personal. Asha pointed toward the screen without entering the restricted zone. Keep 3 at the depot. Let the cleared routes hold position. The safety observer checked Mallory's credential against the operating roster. She is not listed for live dispatch authorization. Vivian turned to him. The sponsor office approved the change this morning. Sponsor approval is not cooperative authorization, a neighborhood delegate said. Where is the member secretary notation? Mallory scrolled through the access panel. Asha saw the line before Vivian blocked the screen. Operational authority changed at 7:12 that morning. No cooperative approval number appeared beside it. Riders began asking whether the vehicles would leave. The launch had been designed to answer those needs, not to display the Pembroke name. For 18 months, Asha had mapped hospital shifts, unsafe transfers, and neighborhoods stranded after dark. Commonway was supposed to open 4 affordable evening and overnight routes, protect 2 medically essential corridors, keep 12 local drivers working, and give members real authority over the service. It was not supposed to become a donor-controlled demonstration. The event manager asked whether the 3 cleared routes could depart. Asha checked her watch. Not under a contested control change. Vivian folded her arms. You said they were cleared. The vehicles are cleared. The authority structure is not. Bennett crossed the plaza. Asha, do not make this bigger than it is. The words hurt more than Vivian's announcement because Asha understood them. Bennett had not been surprised. He believed the launch could be corrected privately after the cameras left. The municipal observer ordered the tablet left on the table. Mallory hesitated before setting it down. The neighborhood delegate photographed the access screen. A small line at the bottom showed the first archived synchronization scheduled for 8:30 p.m. Once the records synchronized, the sponsor authority change would become part of the official archive unless someone challenged it. Asha's watch reads 7:46. She had 44 minutes. If Asha allowed the altered authority record to settle into the system, the community would inherit a network whose control had been taken before its first vehicle moved. She looked at the waiting riders and the amber Route 3 panel. The question was no longer whether she would stay. It was whether she was willing to stop the launch she had built to keep it from becoming something the community had never agreed to. Asha had packed 12 containers of red beans for the drivers because the first full Nightlink shift was supposed to run past 2 in the morning. They were still stacked inside a cooler beside her canvas field bag when riders began leaving the plaza. Launch night was supposed to be route checks, driver handoffs, and affordable service, not a family stage. Asha walked with the member secretary and municipal observer toward the depot office. Behind them, Vivian directed staff to tell the press that a technical delay had interrupted the ceremony. Mallory remained by the dispatch table, speaking too quickly into a headset. Bennett followed Asha into the corridor and closed the office door. "You prove your point," he said. "Route 3 is held. Let the other 3 go. Vivian can finish the public program, and I will restore your operating position tonight." "Restore it under whose authority?" "Mine, if necessary. That is the problem." Bennett had started as a night dispatcher before Pembroke Route Systems became a regional logistics company. He understood why a live control change mattered. That made his answer worse. "The Foundation paid for the vehicles," he said. "We carry the financial exposure. For launch night, the sponsor chain has the final call. You signed that. I approved temporary control so the event would not become chaotic." She remembered the winter blackout when Bennett taught 11-year-old Asha to prioritize a pharmacy delivery and assisted living fuel route with a blue grease pencil. Years later, he mailed her that pencil with a note, "You always knew which trip mattered first." Now he wanted her to protect the ceremony before the riders. "Commonway is a cooperative," she said. "The sponsor office does not own dispatch." Mallory was given live control without authorization. Bennett lowered his voice. "Do not turn this into a public fight with your family. I'm trying to keep it from becoming a private deal with my family." The member's secretary entered with the observer. The authority change lacked the required cooperative notation. The insurer's packet still listed Asha and the lead dispatcher as the emergency control pair. The lead dispatcher was across town with a sick child and could not reach the depot before synchronization. Asha felt the first pressure of her own design. She had limited emergency reassignment authority to 2 people because she wanted to prevent sponsor interference. She had told herself redundancy would come after launch. Now one authorized person was absent and the other had been removed. The system she built to resist misuse had become dependent on her presence. The secretary asked what options remained. At 7:58, Asha said, "We preserve the log and challenge the change." That triggers suspension. Bennett objected, but she answered, "You cannot privately correct a change you had no right to make." Her goal remained 4 affordable late-hour routes, 2 medically essential corridors, paid local drivers, and member control. If she walked away, Vivian could keep the vehicles and maps while cutting low-profit stops under the language of community access. Asha opened her laptop. The service integrity and unauthorized control notice required 3 recipients: the member secretary, municipal observer, and cooperative insurer. Filing it would preserve the logs, freeze unauthorized routes, expose sponsor control and Asha's own architecture, and risk every driver's first paid shifts. Bennett saw the form. "Asha, wait. I will cover every lost wage. I will put you back in charge. That would make me another person you appointed over the members. You built this. That does not give you the right to hand it back to me." At 8:24, she attached the access log image, operating roster, provisional charter, and her own emergency control design. She did not remove the section showing that only she and the lead dispatcher could authorize cross-route reassignment. 6 minutes before the deadline, the insurer acknowledged receipt and issued a temporary suspension. The remaining vehicles shut down their departure panels. Riders groaned. One driver stared at Asha as if she had taken his pay from his hand. Vivian entered with 2 communication staff. "You stopped your own launch. I stopped an unauthorized launch. The public will not hear the difference." Darius appeared in the doorway. "Did you know this could cost us 3 shifts? "Yes." "Did you know the cooperative might not survive it?" "Yes." He looked toward the silent vehicles. "Then you had better be ready for the review to find something wrong with your work, too." At 8:30, the authority change entered the archive under preservation, hold instead of sponsor control. Asha had prevented a quiet rewrite. She had also placed every decision she made into the hands of people who owed her family nothing. By the next afternoon, Asha could no longer enter the Commonway dispatch room. The Civic Route Oversight Council placed her, Mallory, and sponsor staff under temporary suspension while records were preserved. A limited external provider agreed to cover only the 2 medically essential corridors, and even that service began with gaps. 12 drivers lost 3 scheduled shifts. Prepaid fares were refunded. The cooperative paid storage and reassessment costs from reserves intended for winter maintenance. Vivian's office blamed Asha for refusing sponsor protocol. She did not answer publicly. She sat at the small table in her rented duplex with an old tabletop radio open beside her laptop. Her mother had taught her to repair radios because circuits did not care who had the louder name. That night, every wire resembled another path she had controlled too tightly. The reviewers demanded the override architecture and asked whether Commonway could operate without Asha. The answer should have been yes. Emergency override required approval from either Asha or the lead dispatcher. During the suspension, the external provider reported that one Commonway vehicle could have been reassigned to a medically essential corridor, but no authorized person could approve the transfer. 2 service windows were missed. A home health aide named Carla lost a paid shift when she could not reach a client on time. The council asked Asha to join a recorded technical session. Darius attended as driver representative. He did not sit beside her. The transit auditor displayed the authorization map. "Why are there only 2 emergency approvers?" she asked. Sponsor representatives repeatedly requested access during the pilot. Asha said, "I limited override authority to prevent untrained interference." Why was authority not distributed among qualified cooperative staff? The expansion was scheduled after launch. Darius leaned forward. "We asked for it before the last pilot week." Asha remembered the meeting. Drivers had wanted a rotating emergency supervisor. She delayed the change because the launch date was close and she did not want a new permission structure introduced before final testing. "You did," she said, "and I decided the risk of changing the system was higher than the risk of keeping it centralized for another week." "Carla lost a shift because no one could move a vehicle without you," Darius said. Yes, the word hurt because it was accurate. The auditor tested the process with 2 trained dispatchers. They could handle standard delays, cancellations, and substitutions. They could not complete a cross-route reassignment without one of the locked approvals. The council issued a preliminary continuity deficiency. Vivian had abused sponsor power, but Asha had built a single point of dependency into the service. Both facts could be true. At the insurer's office, Bennett offered restored access, repaid wages, and the title executive launch director. "Vivian will step back from operations," he said. "The foundation will keep emergency veto only until the network is stable." "Who appoints the director?" "I do, through the fund." "Then nothing has changed. You would be in control." "That is not the same as the community being in control." Bennett pushed the proposal across the table. "You are letting one mistake erase 18 months of work. I am refusing to let 18 months of work excuse one mistake." She left the proposal unsigned. Server histories, telematics, and driver devices confirmed that Asha created the routes, training, accessibility protocols, and live pilot corrections. The same records proved emergency authority remained concentrated in her hands. Her authorship was becoming clearer as her right to immediate reinstatement weakened. Vivian recognized the opening. She contacted drivers and asked them to sign statements describing the foundation as the pilot's directing authority. Communication staff were told to call Asha an outside consultant. A vehicle vendor received a request to describe the route system as part of its proprietary package. After a driver meeting, Darius said most workers were angry about the lost money. "They have a right to be," Asha replied. "Vivian says you were never building a cooperative. She says you built something only you could run." Asha looked at the dismantled radio. Her false belief had always sounded responsible. If she made the system impossible to misuse, she would never have to depend on anyone's courage. Now the system had failed because she had not trusted enough qualified people with power. "The review should test that claim," she said, "even if it costs you the role. Especially then." The council extended her suspension through full continuity testing. She could provide evidence and technical explanations, but she could not direct live service. Commonway would be tested without her hand on the controls. The review moved from blame to reconstruction. Asha joined from a plain conference room at the insurer's office, without a tablet or access credentials. The auditor displayed route maps evolving from neighborhood requests into Asha Holloway's final late shift, accessible pilot network. Vivian's name appeared only in launch communications. Mallory's appeared in sponsor meetings and media planning. Neither had created the operating structure. Training records and device histories showed Asha trained 12 drivers and corrected a warehouse delay by moving one pickup point. Telematics and rider records confirmed the improvement. The work trail is consistent, the auditor said. That does not resolve the continuity deficiency. It should not, Asha replied. Darius described Asha's overnight pilot work, then the override problem. She built it, he said. She also made too much of it depend on her. The sentence entered the record beside the proof of authorship. The next issue came from the hospital loop. Pickups between 11 and midnight had remained inconsistent even after driver performance improved. Vivian's staff described the numbers as proof the route model was weak. Asha asked the auditor to display raw booking times instead of the average schedule. A dense spike appeared at 11:15 p.m., when two hospital departments changed shifts within minutes of each other. The fixed schedule treated demand as gradual. It was not gradual. It arrived at once. The transfer point is wrong, Asha said. Not the corridor. She marked an approved stop near a pharmacy where two loops could meet without adding a vehicle. A neutral dispatcher asked whether the adjustment would create another delay farther south. Asha used booking records to show southern demand dropped before the hospital spike. The auditor approved a controlled simulation. Asha could explain the logic but not run it. The second problem involved late driver check-ins. Asha compared check-in times with telematics and found a repeating pattern. Drivers were returning from consecutive deadhead trips with too little recovery time before the next assignment. She proposed staggered relief coverage and shorter deadhead pairings. Again, others would test the correction. Asha trained two dispatchers to use the revised rules. She answered questions but held no authorization key. Bennett attended one session from the back row. He said nothing while the server history confirmed Asha built the route system. He said nothing while the same system was criticized for depending too heavily on her. Afterward, he waited beside the elevator. The evidence is proving what you did. It is proving all of it. That should help us settle your position. You still think the problem is finding the right person for you to put in charge. The person who built the system should run it. The members should decide who runs it. Bennett's expression hardened. Members did not finance those vehicles. They're the people the vehicles exist to serve. The elevator arrived. You can support a fair process, Asha said. You cannot order the outcome. She requested a vendor letter describing Commonway's route structure as an extension of proprietary software. She instructed staff to revise public biographies, so Asha appeared as a short-term consultant. Drivers received calls asking them to confirm that sponsor representatives directed the pilot. Some refused. Others said they did not know who held legal authority and would sign nothing. Mallory continued describing sponsor involvement as strategic alignment, a phrase broad enough to sound important and vague enough to avoid operational detail. The council approved a supervised limited service test of Asha's corrections. The two weakest loops would run under neutral dispatch. Asha could observe and answer technical questions, but she could not authorize a route change. For the first time since the launch, she was about to learn whether Commonway could improve. Without her hand on the controls. If it failed, Vivian would say Asha built a personal kingdom and called it a cooperative. If it succeeded, Asha would still have to accept that the safest version of her work was one in which other people could make the right decision without waiting for her permission. The supervised test began on a cold Monday evening with no banners, cameras, or sponsor platform. Two neutral dispatchers sat at separate consoles. A driver member and rider representative observed while Asha stood behind a marked line with no control authority. The hospital loop began with the revised transfer point. At 11:12 p.m., bookings rose as the raw data predicted. One dispatcher shifted a vehicle to the pharmacy stop. The second confirmed the move under the temporary dual authorization rule. Asha said nothing. The route recovered a 3-minute delay before its next stop. On the second loop, staggered relief coverage prevented the usual cluster of late driver check-ins. Darius returned from a deadhead run, handed the vehicle to a relief driver, and watched the next departure leave on time. By the end of the test, the two weakest loops improved from 76% to 89% on-time pickups. Driver handoff failures fell from 7 per test cycle to 1. 2 emergency decisions were completed without Asha. Both medically essential corridors operated through the full window. Telematics, rider scans, dispatch logs, and observer notes independently confirmed the result. The insurer accepted the test as evidence that the corrective model could work. Asha felt pride, then grief. The service was stronger because it no longer needed her to unlock every emergency decision. The flaw had not been caring too much about safety. It had been confusing personal control with protection. Darius told her she had been right about both patterns. Asha answered, "I should have trained more people to overrule me sooner." The Oversight Council released an interim finding the next afternoon. Sponsor staff had no lawful authority to replace launch control. Required operational, member, and safety approvals had not been completed. The finding validated Asha's objection. It did not restore her. Her suspension remained while the continuity review continued. Bennett requested another meeting, this time with a formal proposal. He offered the executive launch director title, restored credit and access, higher pay, and repaid driver wages. The foundation retained emergency veto authority for 18 months. Bennett held appointment and removal power. Family naming rights remained. Community delegates were advisory. "This is everything you asked for before the launch," Bennett said. "No, it is everything you think I asked for. You wanted authority. I wanted lawful authority under the cooperative. You would have more authority than anyone. Because you gave it to me." Bennett leaned back. "You are refusing a solution because you want to punish me. I'm refusing a solution that makes me dependent on the same power that erased me." He pointed to the repayment clause. "The drivers get their wages. The service reopens. You lead it, and the members can be overruled by the donor. Only in an emergency." Launch night was called an emergency because Vivian wanted control. Bennett's face closed. Financial exposure is real. So is community consent. Asha pushed the proposal back. "You can fund a fair process. You cannot appoint me and call it repair." Bennett's almost repair failed because it restored her status while preserving the structure that caused the abuse. Vivian learned of the rejection before the meeting ended. That evening, the foundation released a statement claiming Asha halted a successful launch to force personal control over the project. It cited the continuity deficiency and omitted the interim finding on sponsor authority. Vivian submitted a sponsor declaration claiming the fund held emergency launch authority before the event. She attached a message chain with Asha's objections removed. Mallory signed a retrospective memorandum stating sponsor leadership supervised launch operations. A vehicle vendor suggested its software generated the route model, though it could not produce creation records matching the pilot timeline. Riders wanted the conflict ended, drivers wanted wages restored, and some members preferred an outside operator. Asha's measurable result had not ended the dispute. It had given Vivian a new way to claim the sponsor rescued the service from Asha. The council scheduled a full evidentiary session. Identity, sponsor authority, authorship, continuity, and record integrity would be considered separately. Asha could not answer Vivian by taking Bennett's title. She would have to let every claim, including the claim against her, survive independent review. The full review began with a correction Vivian believed would help her. Foundation counsel confirmed Asha was Bennett's legally acknowledged daughter, which Vivian tried to frame as a private family dispute. The record's administrator rejected the conclusion. The identity file established lineage and a related party disclosure obligation. It did not establish operational authority. Dependent records and Bennett's prior conflict disclosures proved the unrelated guest implication false. The identity finding would remain separate from leadership. Asha agreed. "My father's name does not qualify me to run the service," she said. "The public record should be accurate, and the operating decision should stand on different evidence." The council turned to Vivian's sponsor declaration. The claimed emergency authority did not appear in the charter, insurer packet, or member secretary records. The exported message chain omitted Asha's written objection to donor veto power. Server-side records preserved the missing messages. Mallory's retrospective memorandum was dated after the service integrity notice, though it described the authority as pre-existing. When asked whether she directed the 18-month pilot, Mallory looked at Vivian, then at the driver and rider representatives. "No," she said. "I directed communications. I did not design the routes or train the drivers." Vivian's mouth tightened. Mallory turned over her calendar and launched notes. They showed Vivian planned to introduce her as the next-generation leader before the authority change was entered. The council gave Vivian a formal correction window. She could withdraw the false declaration, provide the full messages, preserve all files, stop contacting drivers and vendors, and recuse herself. Vivian refused, believing retreat would expose the foundation and elevate Asha. She ordered an event contractor to clear the tablet's local cache before the next forensic export. The contractor complied after a preservation notice had been issued. Central dispatch, driver, insurer, and member records survived, turning the deletion into evidence of interference. Vivian then issued another public statement accusing Asha of stopping service because she wanted personal control. The council's preliminary findings arrived 2 days later. Sponsor authority had been improper. Vivian knowingly misclassified Asha and transferred launch-facing control to an unauthorized person. Asha designed and led the pilot. Vivian attempted retrospective authorization and record interference. Then came the finding Asha knew was coming. Her emergency override structure created an unacceptable single point of dependency. The original launch was voided. Asha would not be reinstated. She was barred from sole dispatch authority for 6 months. The insurer refused to cover operations under the existing charter. Remaining foundation funds were frozen. 3 drivers accepted temporary work elsewhere. Members were authorized to consider an outside operator or dissolution. The findings proved Vivian wrong, without proving Asha's old position should be restored. At the driver meeting, blame spread across Vivian, Bennett, and Asha. Darius stood beside a paper wall map marked with proposed authority changes. "We cannot replace donor control with founder control," he said, "even if the founder is right more often." Asha looked at the map and understood that her original strategy had ended. She had proved authorship and abuse, but the institution had shown that authorship was not enough. Returning her to the same structure would preserve the weakness that harmed riders and workers. She stopped asking how to regain her launch role. She began asking what kind of system deserved to survive if she was never chosen. She drafted a distributed authority charter. Emergency changes required 2 qualified approvals. Driver and rider members held removal power. Donors received financial reports, but no operational veto. Leadership candidates disclosed errors and competed through a member election. No provision guaranteed Asha an appointment. She invited drivers, riders, dispatchers, and an accessibility consultant to challenge it. When one delegate proposed naming Asha interim director because she built the corrective model, Asha removed the clause herself. Bennett learned that members were considering 2 external candidates. He called a neighborhood delegate and offered to explain why Asha was uniquely qualified. Asha stopped him. "Do not lobby for me. I'm trying to help. Then support the process. They may choose someone else. That is what a real choice means." Bennett was silent. For the first time, he faced a repair that could cost him power without giving him control over Asha's future. The community had enough evidence to correct the record. It still had no obligation to return the project to the woman who built it. The revised charter session was held in the same plaza where the launch had failed, but there were no banners and no reserved family section. Folding tables replaced the sponsor platform as members reviewed the charter and the council prepared its findings. Asha sat among the members after removing every clause that guaranteed her an interim appointment. The new structure required dual authorization for emergency dispatch changes, member notice before governance revisions, independent continuity testing, and a supermajority process for removing leadership. Donors could receive audited reports. They could not control routes, fares, staff, or appointments. The council opened by stating that recognition would not precede verification. It then issued 6 findings. First, Asha was Bennett's legally acknowledged daughter, and sponsor materials had falsely implied she was an unrelated outside guest. Second, Bennett's addendum did not lawfully transfer operational control to the foundation. Third, Vivian knowingly removed Asha from launch control and handed the tablet to a person without proper authorization. Fourth, Asha designed the route system, trained drivers, directed the pilot, and produced the work that made Commonway possible. Fifth, Asha's emergency override structure created a preventable single point of dependency. Sixth, Vivian submitted a materially false sponsor declaration, withheld Asha's objection, relied on a retrospective memorandum, and ordered the tablet's local cache cleared after preservation notice. The council noted that Vivian had refused opportunities to correct the record, preserve files, withdraw the memorandum, stop witness pressure, and recuse herself. She rejected every option and chose to deepen the false record. Independent digital, insurer, member, vehicle, and witness records preserved the case. No single source solved it. The council also admitted weak dual-control safeguards, delayed member notice, incomplete insurer review, and blurred donor and operational roles. Vivian's consequences were procedural. She was removed as president of the Pembroke Civic Access Fund, barred for 5 years from administering mobility or community governance grants, prohibited from contacting Commonway, required to correct public statements, and placed under independent foundation review. Mallory was removed as sponsor liaison, barred for 2 years from program leadership, required to correct her public biography, and placed under ethics review. Her later cooperation mitigated but did not erase her choices. Then the records administrator and foundation corporate secretary performed the Separate Identity Recognition Act. They entered a correction stating that Asha was Bennett's legally acknowledged direct daughter. Asha Holloway was her established professional name. The unrelated guest implication was false, and the relationship created disclosure duties, but no automatic operational authority. The correction entered all foundation, cooperative, launch, and public records. Asha accepted the accuracy. She declined use of Pembroke in Commonway branding and stated that the correction did not make her the cooperative's leader. Bennett stood only after the identity correction was complete. He did not speak for Asha. He admitted authorizing improper sponsor control because he believed financial exposure entitled his family to command. He signed away the foundation's donor veto and governing seat. He canceled naming rights. He converted remaining funds into restricted, non-controlling service grants. He accepted a 4-year prohibition on Pembroke route systems bidding for Commonway dispatch, fleet, or data contracts. He submitted other mobility programs to independent review and resigned from the city's Philanthropic Mobility Advisory Council for 2 years. He agreed not to nominate, endorse, or lobby for Asha. His visible institutional cost created no authority for Asha. When he approached after the session, Asha set the terms before he could ask for forgiveness. He could send 1 letter every 2 months for the first year. She could answer or not. There would be no gifts, project offers, staff intermediaries, or public reconciliation campaign. You do not get closeness because you finally gave up power you should not have held, she said. Bennett accepted without bargaining. Members passed the charter. The safety observer and insurer approved the distributed control model. Candidate eligibility opened. 2 qualified external candidates entered alongside Asha. The community had corrected who she was. It had verified what she built. It had preserved the finding against her. Now, it had the lawful freedom to choose someone else. The leadership process lasted 10 days and included no family endorsements. Asha submitted a corrective package that disclosed her continuity failure on the first page. She proposed a 6-month transition in which she could not exercise sole emergency authority, quarterly member review, dual signature dispatch changes, an independent accessibility audit, fare protections, and removal by member supermajority. She also committed Commonweigh to publishing performance reports and prohibited the Pembroke name in service branding. Two credible external candidates offered conventional expansion and worker-owned alternatives. The election could not be a ceremony built to reward suffering. Rider members asked why they should trust someone whose design had failed under suspension. Asha answered that they should not trust her without limits. Driver members asked whether she would accept removal if performance declined. She said yes. A neighborhood delegate asked why she had not distributed emergency authority before launch. Asha said she mistook control for protection and the cost fell on people with less power than she had. She did not blame Vivian for that error. Bennett attended none of the candidate sessions. Vivian and Mallory were barred from participation. Foundation staff, conflicted vendors, and Pembroke Route Systems personnel were excluded from voting. The independent administrator verified eligible rider, driver, worker, and neighborhood ballots. When voting closed, the administrator confirmed the count in the cooperative meeting room. The members chose Asha Holloway as founding operations director of Commonweigh Nightlink. The election administrator, not the family or council, announced the verified result. The cooperative chair then asked Asha whether she accepted the role under the revised charter. "I accept under the conditions the members approved," she said. "No do un veto. No sole emergency authority. Public performance review. And the right of this cooperative to remove me." This separate earned role recognition followed identity correction, independent verification, safety and insurer approval, revised governance, competition, and member voting. The community chose her because of her work, corrective judgment, and willingness to build a system that could survive her failure. It did not choose her because Bennett was her father. The consequences remained after the vote. Asha's 6-month restriction did not disappear. She had to complete external continuity governance training. Commonweigh retained removal power. Bennett's procurement exclusion and loss of naming rights remained. Vivian did not return to the foundation. Mallory's ethics review continued. Drivers received restitution for lost shifts through a cooperative-controlled fund assembled from non-controlling grants and institutional reserves, not from a personal check Bennett could use as leverage. Commonweigh approved a phased restart instead of another grand launch. The first week would activate only the 2 medically essential corridors. The remaining routes would reopen after dual control drills and accessibility checks. She reviewed driver relief schedules, sat through member questions, repaired a tabletop radio for the depot break room, and carried red beans to an overnight training session. Darius watched 2 dispatchers complete an emergency reassignment without asking Asha for permission. "That would have bothered you 6 months ago," he said. "It still bothers me a little," she replied. "That is why the rule cannot depend on whether I am comfortable." The original tablet was removed from evidence custody after the record integrity process ended. Asha did not take it home or place it on her desk. The cooperative mounted it in the training room beside the dual authorization procedure and a short account of the failed launch. It warned against both seized and concentrated authority. On the evening before service resumed, Bennett's first permitted letter arrived at Asha's duplex. She placed it unopened in a drawer beside the blue grease pencil. The boundary required Bennett to communicate without directing or purchasing forgiveness. Asha returned to Eastgate Transit Commons before dawn. There were no sponsor banners. Commonweig's name appeared on the departure board without a family crest. Riders began arriving in work shoes and winter coats, carrying grocery bags, lunch containers, and medical appointment folders. The service was 7 weeks late, with lost wages and damaged trust. But the people waiting for the first vehicle now had the authority to review, challenge, and remove the person leading it. The phase relaunch began without a countdown. A driver member confirmed the vehicle inspection. A rider representative verified the passenger list. A neutral dispatcher completed the first authorization. Asha stood at the 3rd station and added her approval only after the other 2 were recorded. No one person held every key. The first medically essential corridor left Eastgate Transit Commons at 5:42 in the morning. A home health aide boarded with a thermos and folded schedule in her coat pocket. An older rider settled near the accessible door. The vehicle moved beneath the depot lights without the Pembroke name on its side. Asha watched it clear the exit and felt the loss of the launch she had imagined. There was no stage or restored ceremony, only a working route and shared authority. Over the next 7 days, both medical corridors met the revised reliability standard. Driver handoffs remained within the new threshold. No emergency decision required Asha's sole approval. During the second week, the remaining routes entered service. Members reviewed performance in an open meeting and challenged one transfer delay before Asha could defend it. She listened, assigned the test, and accepted the correction. Leadership under her terms did not mean freedom from scrutiny. It meant choosing a structure in which scrutiny had lawful power. Darius and the drivers ate the last reheated red beans after the first complete overnight cycle. One driver joked that the food had survived more launches than the original charter. Asha laughed, tired enough that the sound surprised her. She still returned to her rented duplex, walked routes before traffic built, repaired old radios, and used the name Asha Holloway. The legal record remained accurate. The family name did not become her brand. Vivian had no direct contact with her. Mallory could communicate only through the formal correction process until the ethics review ended. Bennett sent letters at the permitted intervals. Asha answered none during the first 4 months. In the 5th month, she sent 1 page. She told him that if he wanted a relationship, he would have to learn the difference between supporting a person and controlling the conditions around her. She gave no promise beyond that. At the end of Asha's 6-month probation, Commonwealth members reviewed her performance. They reviewed fares, complaints, turnover, accessibility, emergency decisions, and distributed authority. The membership renewed her term under the same removal provisions. Bennett did not attend. The renewal belonged to the cooperative. On the wall of the training room, the old dispatch tablet remained beside the dual authorization rule. New drivers learned that it had been taken to make the builder a guest, and that her own design had also concentrated too much power. Both truths stayed visible. That was why the object belonged to the institution rather than to Asha. The renewal did not transform the past into a misunderstanding. Carla's lost shift remained part of the cooperative's restitution record. The drivers who had left were free to stay elsewhere. Asha's 6-month restriction remained in her personnel history beside the performance gains that followed it. When new members asked why those failures were preserved, she told them that accountability became meaningless when institutions displayed only victories. Commonwealth's strength was not that it had found a flawless leader. It was that no leader, donor, founder, or family could quietly remove the record of what had gone wrong. She had not won the right to hold every lock. She had earned the chance to help build doors the community could open, close, and protect together. They had called her a guest at the door she built. The community chose her only after she proved the door could stay open without her hand on every lock. Another daughter can inherit a family name and still discover that the people using her work were never told who was allowed to control it. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.